Hi there, Sweets, Treats, and Eats fans. I want to introduce you to our new sponsor for this episode. It's Knack, K-N-A-C-K. It's more than a bag. It's a multifunction marvel that gives you the freedom to grab and go. So in the office, you can put your computer and all the things that go with the computer and the office, and you go day to day, back and forth to the office. But when you have that weekend getaway that you want to quick grab and go, it turns into a nice piece of luggage where you can put all of your clothes and your toiletries together, and you're off to the races. So Knack has a special promotion for viewers of this episode. If you go to their website and you purchase a bag, you will get a free TSA approved lock for your bag. So when you go to the site and order the bag, just type in promo code EAT, E-A-T, and you will get the lock at no charge. I think that's great. And I'd just like to welcome Knack to the Sweets, Treats, and Eats family. Welcome to Living Life, the show that allows you to pursue things that make you happy, curious, and keep you open-minded. This is Living Life on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Welcome to Living Life, Sweets, Treats, and Eats on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, presented by Knack. I'm Howie Morgasen. On this episode of Sweets, Treats, and Eats, we are going to go over tips and tricks for the kitchen. So we have an entire episode dedicated to tips and tricks, and we're going to talk about things like measurements, we're going to talk about cutlery, and we're going to talk about organization. So all the tips and tricks you need around those three areas to help you get ready to make really good recipes. If you want to find out more about the tips and tricks that you're going to see in this episode, you can check us out on social media at Living Life ETB and at ETB Network. So let's get started. So let's talk about measurements. As you can see here, I have a number of different apparatus that we use for doing measurements because there's different types of things that we measure. We have dry measure, and that's things like flour and sugar and salt. And then we have liquid measure, which we do things like water, wine, and other things that you would add to it. We also have temperature, so you have things like a thermometer like this that you would use. So depending on what you're working with, would dictate how you do it. And we're going to take a look at each of these and how to use them. So first up, we're going to take a look at dry measurements. So the first thing for dry goods is we have the scale, and that's what you see here. And the scale, we're going to turn it on, and then you can see once it starts up, it says 0. And then we're going to put a cup to hold the flour that we're measuring, and you'll see that it registers the weight of the cup. And that's no good because it'll affect our measurements. So we hit the 0 key over here and it zeroes out the display. So now we can add our flour to it till we get what we want. Okay. And then once we have the measurement we want, we're all set to go. And that's simply how you do dry measurements. It's the most accurate way to measure dry goods. So let's talk about measuring cups and measuring spoons for that matter. So you have measuring cups like these over here and these, which are similar. So these are dry measuring cups, and they come in different sizes, and you can use this to scoop ingredients that are dry. For wet ingredients, you have measuring cups like this one over here that come in different sizes as well. So depending on how much liquid you need, you can get the appropriate measuring cups, and it's easy to work with. And then you have spoons. So typically, a lot of times people go into the old silverware drawer and they get a teaspoon or a tablespoon, but those aren't real measurements of a teaspoon or tablespoon. You really need to get a set of these measuring spoons that come anywhere from a tablespoon all the way up to 1/8 of a teaspoon. And these are really handy to have, and they work really well. So now let's take a look at the wet measure and what it looks like. Okay, so as you can see, I have measuring cups here, and measuring cups, in this instance, these are for liquid measure, and you can see they come in all different sizes. If you're doing small amounts, then this cute little measuring cup over here would be what you're using. If you're working on soups, for instance, where you need a lot of liquid, then you'd probably using a measuring cup like this. For most recipes where you're putting liquid ingredients in, you'd probably work with something like this. But it's nice to know that you have all different size measuring cups to get the job done. So now let's take a look at what measuring with a liquid measuring cup looks like. So we have our measuring cup here. You can see that you see the measurements on the outside, but also some measuring cups have measurements on the inside to make it easier. So depending on what you're comfortable with, that's what you go with. And measuring is pretty straightforward. When you're pouring, you pour slowly. So if we want 8 ounces of liquid, we pour, and as we get closer to the 8, we slow down. And there we go, 8 ounces, a perfect pour. So we looked across measurements just to give you a quick tip on how to work with measurements. Measurements are very important, so spend the time and do it accurately. I also wanted to mention that there's 2 types of measurement scales. There's the metric scale, which is used mostly in Europe and also a lot in the US. And then there's the US scale, which is ounces and pounds. So I find that metrics gives me a more accurate measurement, so that's what I tend to use, but you can use whatever is comfortable to you. So I wanted to thank you for joining me on this tips and tricks episode, and remind you that you can check us out on social media at Living Life ETB and also at ETB Network. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, I'm Jerry Barmash, host of Here Now the News. I've used this microphone over the years for radio work, and I take that mic and the experience to this weekly podcast. If you've been a regular viewer, you know guests have varied from politics to pop culture. There was a bartender who wrote about his adventures making drinks at Hamilton. Petrie Hawkins Bird chatted about his working relationship with Judge Judy coming to an abrupt end. And there are plenty more where that came from. Here Now the News, part of the Empty the Bench podcast network, features one-on-one engaging, entertaining interviews. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to Here Now the News on YouTube. And thanks for watching.
For more about the tips and tricks you're going to see today, check us out on social media at Living Life ETB and at ETB Network. So today we're talking about cutlery, and you can see I have a variety of knives here for different jobs. So we start out with this cleaver, and this is a kind of a massive type of knife. This particular cleaver is used for meat. So if you're cutting meat, it's a great thing to have. You also notice that I have a cutting board here, which I'm displaying the knives on. It's very important that when you do cutting, you do it on a cutting board, or else you can dull the knife, and it also might be dangerous to you. So we have the meat cleaver that we have there. This is a hollow edge knife, and you can see the hollow edges along here. And this is typically used for general slicing, could be vegetables and things like that, but it's a very good knife, a very light duty knife to have. This is a carving or a slicing knife, which you can use for carving turkey or chicken or other kinds of meat. And very sharp, and this is a good knife to use for carving. Here is the workhorse knife. This is a serrated knife, and you can see the edge on the serrated knife. This is typically used for bread, all different types of bread, could be bagels, could be rolls. Also for certain types of fruit, like tomato or others, that you want to get a really nice sharp cut with. Serrated knife is good for that. Here we have the chef's knife, and this is a great general purpose knife that can be used for a lot of different things. It allows you to get a lot of action in because it's heavy and large, and it gives you good access to what you're working on. And then we have here what we call a paring knife. And this is for things like if you're peeling fruit, if you're working with fish and you want to be able to cut it and work with it, paring knife is a great knife to use. So those are the different types of knives that we have here. There are loads of other types of knives that you can get, but these are the basic ones that most kitchens should have, maybe except for the meat cleaver, but the other ones most kitchens should have. What we're also going to do is show you some of the basic cuts that you can do with the knife, and we'll look at that right after this. So it makes sense when you're using knives to maintain them so they'll continue to work for you for years to come. And it's pretty simple to maintain a knife. So for the straight edge knives, you have this called a steel, and it's actually a piece of metal. And what you do is you use it to straighten the blade. You're not really sharpening it, but what you're doing is by bringing it across on a slight angle on both sides, it's actually straightening the blade, so it works much better for you. So it's a pretty simple process, and what you're supposed to do is right before you use it each time is you take it and you just run it across the steel a couple of times, and then you're ready to go. So that's the first thing. You can't use the steel on serrated knives, but you have these sharpeners, and these sharpeners are relatively inexpensive. They work on serrated knives, and what you need to do is you just take the knife, the serrated knife, and you put it in, and then you just bring it across a couple of times, and that's it, and it's sharpened. So it makes sense to make sure your knives are well maintained. The other thing is, send your knives out to a sharpening service, professional sharpening service, maybe once a year or every 2 years, just to make sure your knives are sharp, because a sharp knife is the best thing to use, and actually a dull knife could actually cause accidents as well. So now let's take a look at the standard ways of cutting things up. So we're going to take a look at slicing, dicing, and chopping. Slicing first, we have this nice tomato here. We have our serrated knife that we talked about before. And so what we're going to do is, when you're slicing, it's important to start at the back and pull your way through nice and slow. So you find the space on the tomato and you go back and forth, nice and easy, and you get perfect slices. We'll make some more. There's another one. And what you wind up with is a really nice tomato, like you can use for hamburgers coming off the grill. You can use on sandwiches and lots of other nice things. All right, so now we're going to do chopping, and we have half an onion here. We cut it in half, and the root side is there. We want that to be intact because it holds things together. What we're going to do is do a slice down like that, take that piece away, and then we're going to make a couple of slices across like that and like that, and then we're going to cut down into the onion. And then we're going to turn it, and we're going to make slices, and you will see what happens is that the onion comes away in nice small pieces. Then we can turn it, we can finish it off. And then what we want to do is take the onion, put it in the center, and then just rock it. And what that's going to do is make even smaller pieces of the onion. And now you have a nice chopped onion. So the last one left to do is dicing. So we have a carrot here, and we have our hollow edge knife that we're going to use for this. So the first thing we do is we're going to cut the carrot in half, and then we're going to cut it in half again. So the whole idea about dicing is to get pieces of carrot that are the same size. So what then we're going to do is we're going to cut this into what we call planks. Okay, and then we line up all our planks, and then we just cut across them. And what we wind up with are these nice little dices of carrot that we can use in whatever we need. Soups, really nice. So that's what dicing is about. I want to thank you for joining us on this tips and tricks journey through cutlery. We showed you the different knives and what they could be used for. We also showed you some techniques. We showed you chopping, dicing, and slicing. So how you deal with different foods and how you make them ready for your recipes. So I'm glad you can join us for this. I wanted to also mention that If you want to check out more tips and tricks on social media, it's at Living Life ETB and at ETB Network. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, I'm Tony Montori Jr. I know you've been following us and watching us on Living Life Home Design Concepts is my show. There's lots of shows and lots of interesting things going on here. I like to bring a new tip or tip of the month kind of thing to you where I talk about design concepts, how to make it easier to hang pictures, how to enhance the energy in your home, or just decorating in general. So join me and look for a new episode of Tony Montori Jr. on Living Life Home Design Concepts, and I'll help you solve some of your home decorating situations.
For more about the tips and tricks that we're sharing with you today, feel free to check us out on social media at Living Life ETB and at ETB Network. So today we're going to talk about organization in the kitchen. One of the most important things that I have learned over the years to be successful in what you're cooking in the kitchen is being organized. The French call it mise en place. And essentially, it's all about the prep work that you do. So when you start cooking, you are ready. Everything is standing by in a place that you can reach and get to. You don't have to stop what you're doing and run to the refrigerator, stop what you're doing and go to the cupboard. Everything is ready in one place. And you can see that there are various things that I think that you should keep in mind when you're setting up to cook a recipe. So one of them is the prep of the ingredients that you're going to be using for that particular recipe. And you can see over here, I have various ingredients. I have onions, I have tomato, and I have carrots that I prepared. In a different tips and tricks episode, I showed cutlery and various techniques on how to do this. Feel free to look that up on our YouTube channel, and you can learn all about how to prepare things that look like this. So first thing we do is we prepare our ingredients that we're going to use. That includes herbs and spices, which we have here. So what herbs and spices are you going to use? Let's have them all ready so that we can do that. And then what type of utensils are we going to need to make this recipe? Are we going to need spoons? Are we going to need tongs? Are we going to need spatulas? So that's important. And then what type of cooking vessels are we going to need? Are we going to need a pot? Are we going to need a frying pan? Are we going to need a casserole dish? These are all things that are important. So when you're planning out the ingredients, you can get bowls like these. I picked these up. They're fairly inexpensive, and as you can see, they're all different sizes. So as you are planning the different ingredients that you're working with, you have bowls like these. You don't have to have fancy bowls. You can use plastic bowls if you want to. That would serve perfectly well. And then you put all the ingredients, in these bowls, and they're ready to go by the stove or wherever you're going to be cooking. And that's it. It all comes together. So organization is key in the kitchen. And what I'm saying is you can save yourself a lot of aggravation because everything you need will be right by your side and ready to cook. And that guarantees you a great dish. So I want to wish you good luck in your cooking. And organization, to me, is one of the most important things that you can do. For more information and tips and tricks, check out our social media at Living Life ETB and at ETB Network. Thanks for joining us.